In turmoil as the clock ticks to the president's 100th day in office. This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. President Trump has had his troubles with federal judges, and here we go again. A judge in San Francisco blocking the president's executive order on immigration, which would take away funds from sanctuary cities. White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus says the Ninth Circuit is, his words, going bananas. Then there's the Russia investigation. The House Oversight Committee saying disgraced National Security Advisor Michael Flynn may have broken the law when he failed to properly disclose payments from Russia. I want to get right to Michael Flynn and the very latest on the Russia investigation. Joining me now, CNN's Mark Preston, Gloria Borger, and Pamela Brown. Also with us, counterterrorism analyst Philip Mudd, former Congressman Jack Kingston, a CNN political commentator, and Michael Moore, the former U.S. Attorney for the Middle District of Georgia. Good evening, everyone. Pamela, we're going to start with you for the news on this. The latest on the state of the Russia investigation tonight, and particularly Lieutenant General Flynn. Did he break the law in his dealings with Russia while he was an advisor to the Trump campaign?
Well, members of the House Oversight Committee say it's likely that he did break the law after reviewing classified documents today. They said after reviewing those documents, they've seen no proof showing Flynn received permission from the Pentagon or the State Department for the foreign government payments that he received from both Russia and Turkey. And they say that he didn't fully disclose the more than $500,000 his firm was given for lobbying activities on behalf of Turkey when he applied to reinstate his security clearance before he became the national security advisor. And they say he didn't disclose the $45,000 he received from Russia for a RT TV speaking engagement. And so they said because of those issues, it appears that he may have broken the law here, Don.
Jason Chaffetz, a congressman, is speaking out tonight. He spoke to our Manu Raju. Phil, this is for you to pay particular attention to this.
Personally, I see no information or no data to support the notion that General Flynn complied with the law, and that is he was supposed to seek permission and receive permission from both the Secretary of State and the Secretary of the Army prior to traveling to Russia to not only accept that payment, but to engage in that activity. I see no evidence that he actually did that.
And the reason I'm giving it to you, Phil, is because I know you have very strong opinions about what Chaffetz said today. Explain why.
I think he's dead wrong. Look, there's somebody who investigates whether there's a violation of law. That's the FBI. There's somebody in the executive branch who determines whether to take that to a court, whether to ask a judge and a jury whether someone has committed a crime. That's the Department of Justice. The Congress has a role here. Their role is significant. That is, can we protect candidates in the next election to ensure they don't get hacked? Can we have a conversation with people like Twitter, Yahoo, Facebook about ensuring that fake news gets off the internet? It is not Jason Chaffetz's problem to determine who committed a crime. That's the Department of Justice. He crossed the line here. The House committee repeatedly has been involved in a farcical investigation, and this is another step. He should not have suggested that there was a crime committed. That's for the Department of Justice.
So Phil, then should this be taken out of the hands of the House? Should there be a special prosecutor, a special investigation? Should someone else be handling this investigation?
I think there should be, because repeatedly from the House, we've seen that they're trying to investigate whether individuals involved with the Trump campaign committed a federal violation. They should be not looking in the rearview mirror. They should be looking forward to the next election, the next by-election, and saying, how do we protect the American people? Repeatedly, they've shown, starting with Devin Nunes, who said in a politically motivated move, I've got to go inform the White House of what I'm learning before I inform the community, the committee. And now with Jason Chaffetz saying, I've got to suggest that a White House official committed a crime instead of investigating how to protect the American people from fake news. They've repeatedly shown that they cannot conduct this investigation without partisan allegations about people involved with the Trump campaign. Inappropriate.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the White House, Gloria. They declined to provide documents related to Flynn. That the House Oversight Committee requested. A White House aide tells CNN that they don't have documents, and they redirected the committee to the relevant agencies. Do you think the White House is stonewalling here?
No, I think they're done with Flynn. I think they defended him until they could no longer defend him, and they found a reason to fire him, which was, not telling the truth to Mike Pence. But I think they're done with him and they want no fingerprints on him anymore. And I think, the issue here is not just the issue we're talking about and Russia and the speeches, et cetera, et cetera. The issue also is the question of disclosure about lobbying for Turkey while he was on advising Donald Trump. And I think what would happen if you investigated all this stuff, one of the reasons maybe the White House doesn't want you to have documents, is that you'd see that the vetting process was not up to snuff and that perhaps they didn't know as much as they should have known. And if they did know and nominated him anyway, that would be even a bigger problem for them. Yeah. So I think as far as they're concerned, their best avenue here, although it's not transparent, their best avenue here is to deflect and to say, well, talk to the law enforcement agencies. Well, this is no longer our problem, not our problem. He doesn't work here anymore.
Well, Gloria, how can it not be their problem? How can they be done with him? Because, he was so close. He was an advisor. He was, he was. He served as a national security advisor for a short amount of time. And then, so as you were talking about vetting, I was writing extreme vetting. What happened? How can they be done with him?
Well, the question is whether they are done with him, because that's up to law enforcement to figure out, and the congressional committees are going to look at it. And that his lawyer has been trying to get immunity for him, and we'll see where that goes. It looks at this moment like it's going nowhere. Yeah. But this is a White House that doesn't want to be talking about Flynn. We're heading into the first 100 days. They've got other problems they've got to deal with right now, and you're going to deal with that later. The ruling on sanctuary cities, they've had a problem on the travel ban and healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a problem they think is in their rearview mirror. Yeah, they think it's gone, and they don't want to touch it anymore, Don. And that's what Sean was telegraphing in a really strong way today.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up, because Mark is feverishly scribbling notes here and writing, trying to talk to me as you guys are talking. So the press
Mark, are you disagreeing with me?
No, he's not necessarily. I think he just wants to jump in. But before she brought up Sean Spicer, and I want to play what Sean Spicer had to say today, and then Mark, you can respond.
I don't. That would be a question for him and a law enforcement agency, whether or not he filled. I don't know what he filled out and what he did or did not do. That all happened. He filled that form out prior to coming here, and so it would be up to the committee and other authorities to look at that. I don't know.
The question was whether he broke the law or not. But what does this say about the Trump administration's vetting? And what did you want to jump in on?
Well, a couple of things. Mark this down in the history books. Gloria, I actually agree with you on something right now. Bottom line is, let's just go back to when he was let go by the White House, when President Trump forced him to resign. It was Vice President Mike Pence who was very upset at Michael Flynn for failing to tell him truthfully what was going on right now. They're at a time right now where they wanted to cut the rope, and they thought the rope was cut and that Michael Flynn would have to deal with it himself. Little do they know that they can't do that right now, that they are so ensnared in this, whether they like it or not, that they have to deal with the issue. And when you see Sean Spicer up there right now, somebody who he himself is in the service right now, he's active military, he's got to be saying to himself, why am I up here having to basically answer for the sins, potential sins, of somebody else?
Michael, you think this could be big trouble not only for Flynn, but for the vice president. How come?
I do, Don. I'll tell you that I think the bigger problem is both Mike Pence and Mike Flynn. The vice president was in charge of the transition team. And essentially what happened is then they had a guy, that being Flynn, who was just a few hands away from the nuclear codes, and for whatever reason, they missed this problem. They didn't vet him appropriately. I think they were probably more interested in making sure that they ran the transition a little bit like a casting call for a reality show. We had people showing up at Trump Tower. We had people riding up down the elevators and shaking hands with each other. What they should have been doing is digging around a little bit and finding out if any of these problems existed. So I think it could be a problem for Mike Pence, and I agree with the other panelists who have said that's why they don't want to talk about it. It goes well beyond Mike Flynn.
So, Jack Kingston, what should the White House do in regards to this investigation?
I think they should do what they've been doing. They should turn over documents that they have, but at the same time, I think that they've got to move on. Elijah Cummings has said there's no sign of them being obstructionists, and I think so that they should let the lawyers look at it. I think Flynn does have very serious problems. I've had to do some of these forms, not all of them, but I know that the disclosure of who you visit and who you're working for, all that is very basic, and yet If you are an applicant for one of these jobs, you can sometimes fudge. And I think early on, when you talk about somebody who was with the campaign 2015, 2016, he kind of grew in it and probably did not get the oversight of some of the newer applicants. And I know, for example, a friend of mine is up for one of the White House jobs, and one of the questions he's asked is, name everybody in the world who might not want you to work here. And, you know, it's that
Jack,
broad.
you're going on with this story, but what are you saying? I have no idea what you're saying.
What I'm saying is I think that General Flynn came in through the campaign ranks. He was not vetted as well as people who came on later. The vetting process became more and more formalized. They depended on Flynn to actually tell the truth and do his own due diligence, and now they realize, oh, you got to have a lot of oversight.
So what you're saying is that the administration did a bad job of vetting Michael Flynn.
I think they did a fair job on it, but it's obvious they have to do more than that. They have to. Hey, Don, listen, I'm not going to remind you he's the only Democrat in the administration. You know, obviously you got to keep your eye on these people. I don't know.
Jack,
you
fair
me.
job.
You pushed me.
When you look at what happened with it, that he didn't, you know, give such certain disclosures, you think it's a fair job? He had to resign. That was a fair job of vetting. Come on, Jack.
Listen, I think that it's atrocious that he did not turn in all his paperwork, and
okay.
You know, I'm in agreement on that.
Okay, let's talk. Can we talk about Sally Yates, Gloria? Because we heard Sally Yates is going to testify. What does that mean?
Well, look, Sally Yates knows an awful lot about conversations.
She was a deputy attorney general, right?
Right. She's a deputy attorney general. She was fired because she was insubordinate. And look, she knows a lot about where bodies are buried, about conversations that were held in the White House. She went to the White House counsel and said, you know, look, there's a lot of funny stuff going on here, conversations perhaps that shouldn't have been had between transition officials and who knows, Russians. She knows what the intercept said, and Pam, you know, can speak to this better than I can, but you know, Sally Yates is somebody that Democrats want to hear from, probably more than Republicans. And, you know, she's now viewed as a partisan figure because she was insubordinate and she did get fired. But we would want to know what she actually said to the White House counsel when she said, wait a minute, these intercepts that we've listened to, there may be something in them.
Yeah. Pamela, go ahead. Gloria said you could speak to that better. Go ahead.
Well, right. I can tell you, you know, Sally Yates, as Gloria said, was fired by President Trump for being insubordinate. But she very much was a key figure in Michael Flynn's firing himself, because she was the one, as Gloria pointed out, to say, look, I've looked at the transcripts and he is lying about this, and he could be subjected to blackmail by the Russians because he did in fact talk about sanctions. And she's someone who wants to talk. You know, she's been under the radar. She's been laying low since she was fired by President Trump. But I do think she wants to talk. And of course, this is an opportunity when she testifies before the Judiciary Committee to not only talk about what she knew about the Flynn situation, but other issues related to the Russia investigation.
Well, the question is, Michael, insubordination or just doing her job? Because I think you know Yates, and you think that her testimony is going to be a good thing, but you have some concerns. Why?
Well, I don't know that we're going to actually hear publicly all that she has to say. I think probably the most important thing and compelling thing we're going to actually get out of her testimony will be the timeline and some of the sequence of how some of the conversations came about. We may get the sequence of when certain people were told certain things, but I don't know that we'll get into the crux of what those were. And the reason is simple. She is privy, as she was acting Attorney General at the time and Deputy Attorney General before that, she's privy to information that may be classified. She's also privy to information about potentially ongoing investigations. So I don't think we'll get into that, but I think really the timeline may start to tell us. When did they pick people up on a wire? When were certain conversations relayed to other people? And when would we have expected other folks to have knowledge about improprieties either in the Trump transition team or in the administration later?
All right, Pamela Brown, thank you very much. Everyone else, please stick around. When we come back, a federal judge blocking part of another of President Trump's executive orders, what this means for sanctuary cities, and could the president other executive orders be under threat as well?